Welcome back. I am John P. Today we are going to be talking about Grail watches. Now, what is a Grail watch? Basically, a Grail watch is a watch that a collector sets their sight on to stand for the pinnacle of their watch collecting experience. In other words, this is a watch that a collector may refer to as a watch that would be the be-all, end-all of their collecting experience. They can stop collecting watches. This is the best watch for them. There's nothing more that they would want. This is the ultimate watch for the collector. Of course, there are some variants in the way people look at these Grail watches, but generally speaking and historically, that's kind of where the term came from, right? The earliest days of the watch forums, places like Time Zone, Watch You Seek, places like that, these forums where collectors would have to go to before we had Instagram. By the way, my Instagram is the real John P. And YouTube and so many other places. That's where terminology like this came from. Now, I was thinking about this, right? I'm a watch collector as well. I'm not just a watch dealer at Delray Watch. I also collect watches, and I have for quite some time. And so I was on my morning walk here today in South Florida having my coffee, and I thought about just the term Grail watch. I'm not sure why it popped into my head, but it did. And I kind of thought about it as more than just that, right? It seems that with Grail watches, there's a little bit of a mentality that comes along with that. And I want to share with you not only my experience with Grail watches, but also the experience with other collectors I've heard them experience, not only talking with other collectors, but also working with them from the dealer perspective on why setting a Grail watch may not always be what it's cracked up to be. It may not be what you think it is. Now, if you are one of the people that found a Grail watch and you worked so hard to find it or source it or fund it, and that's it, you ended your collection, time has stood, and you haven't moved on to other things, that's great. Applause to you. But what I see a lot of the time, especially now where the watch market is going berserk, right? There's so much demand for watches today and the pricing is climbing because of this, where a lot of watches are drying up on the market. Now, you can get a Daytona, even though pay several times retail price, but even from some more approachable brands, they're just kind of drying up there on places like Chrono24 and eBay and watch dealers, because more watch collectors exist, more watch collectors want what exists out there, and so it follows that there's less available on the market. So, there's this trend that I see working with collectors at Delray Watch that people want to trade in oftentimes their entire watch collection for these Grail watches. And this seems to be happening a lot more, right? This would be something maybe people would do in the past, but now it seems to be a trend. I'm noticing this a lot more. People want to trade in their entire collection for that one watch. Now, I'll share with you a lot of the times when this does happen, you get the Grail watch. This is at least just what I see, right? This is, anecdotal, right? This isn't, in any way kind of officially studied. It's just what I see sharing with you. People get the Grail watch, or collectors get the Grail watch, and it's not the end, right? You get that one piece that you thought, if I just got this piece, that's it, I'm done. The search, the hunt, I've truly reached this point. I don't need any more. That is rarely the case. To know every watch that existed, as well as every watch that may come in the future, is just not possible. And so to set your Grail watch as a watch today, and then one that comes out tomorrow that you like more, well, now your Grail watch just changed, right? And so it's, I guess kind of the best way to describe this is that old anecdote that floats around out there in the world of never meet your hero, right? And I think the reasoning behind that is, sometimes people meet their hero or some type of musician or a politician or something that they always looked up to. Doesn't matter what the type of person, but maybe they looked up to them and they had this idea in their head of what it was, who they were, what it would be like to talk with them. And then perhaps they meet them and it's not like that and they feel very let down. And it's like all the thoughts they had in the past are no longer relevant because that was never the case. And sometimes, and this happens more often than not, that is the case with watches, right? Because even though it may be a really nice watch, it may be the pinnacle of watchmaking, right? It might be some very rare, complicated Patek Philippe watch that, for all intents and purposes and utility-wise, it's just such a great achievement, and also comes with a hefty price tag, which people place a lot of value and weight on when it comes to Grail watches oftentimes. And so people will sometimes, collectors will get these watches and they'll be maybe a little bit disappointed, right? Especially if the watch is rare enough to where maybe they couldn't put it on their wrist. Maybe they couldn't see how it was to experience the watch. They feel maybe a little bit let down, but as time goes on, whether or not they were let down in the first place of putting that Grail watch on their wrist, collectors will tend to gravitate towards something else. And I can absolutely understand this, because before I had the ability, and honestly, just being quite fortunate with Del Rey Watch, being able to touch so many cool and interesting, unique watches and kind of scratch my itch that way, it was very much the same for myself. But one day I kind of realized, it wasn't necessarily about the Grail and kind of, finding it or sourcing it or funding it or anything like that. It was actually just about the experience of doing those things, right? Setting the milestone, kind of working towards it, or the process of finding it, hunting it, right? It was maybe more about the hunt than it was the actual watch. You could have swapped out the watch for something else du jour that perhaps I would have liked just as much. And it was more about the experience and the hunt and, the camaraderie and the finding of it, the actual process, than it was the watch. And far too often, I see this to be the case with other collectors. And let's say you are the one collector that gets that watch that you set there on the pedestal of the ultimate watch, never want another watch. What are you going to do with your free time in the hobby, right? You still want to keep watches as a hobby and a passion. What do you fill that gap with, right? Perhaps YouTube, perhaps other places, but then you're exposed to more watches that you may have overlooked, and then you set another Grail watch. And so that tends to be my experience with Grail watches when kind of viewed from that angle. But more so than that, this is the experience that I've seen with other people. This is also my experience a lot of the time, but I also want to know, what is your experience with Grail watches? Are you, or have you obtained a Grail watch that you set your sights on? And I'd love to hear how it worked out for you. Was that the end of it? Was that your ultimate Grail watch? You don't need another watch? Did you free up funds perhaps by clearing out your watch collection? Or did you get the Grail watch and you thought, this isn't what it's all cracked up to be? Perhaps you moved on to something else, or maybe you needed more. I would love to hear this in the comments below, because I think this is a topic that so many people talk about. There's a lot of videos, a lot of references, and a lot of just viewing a lot of these iconic models in some cases as Grail watches. And I do think that unfortunately, when spoken about and kind of viewed through that context, it can perhaps cause you to maybe let go of some watches that you just got to experience so many interesting and enjoyable parts of life with, right? Perhaps birth of a child, weddings, anniversaries, vacations, things like that. And for watches, I know so many of you will agree, but for myself, to have a certain watch on your wrist and be able to look back in time and say, at this particular moment in time, during this milestone or this thing that happened that was important, I wore this watch. And I see a lot of collectors that will sell their entire collection to get the one Grail, and perhaps it didn't work out the way that they intended. What do you think about this? I would love to see your opinions in the comments below. Thanks, guys. We've been chatting with John P.